She bullied the handsome, powerful, crippled billionaire, and this happened. I should have spoken up. Maybe if I had, things wouldn't have ended the way they did. But fear is a strange thing. It silences you, makes you a spectator in your own life. I watched it all happen, and even now, years later, I still hear the echoes of her screams at night. It started with a whisper in the village. A rich man had moved into the old house at the edge of town. People said he was a billionaire, but he was not like the rich men we knew, those with loud voices and fat bellies. He was young, very young, and beautiful like something carved from stone. But he was crippled. Some said it was a curse. Others said an accident. His legs were useless, thin like sticks. He never walked, only sat in his wheelchair. He had money, but money couldn't change what he was. And because of that, he became the perfect... Thank you for joining our channel, MAT, Billionaire African Folktales. Please, if this is your first time, subscribe and click notification for new videos. Thanks for watching. Her name was Amina. She was the most beautiful girl in our village, and she knew it. Her beauty was a kind that made men stupid and women jealous. But there was something else inside her, something cruel and cold. She loved power, loved to break people just to watch them shatter. And when she heard about the billionaire, she laughed. A rich cripple? She scoffed. What use is money when you can't even stand like a man? At first, she ignored him. But then, she realized something. He liked her. I don't know how she knew. Maybe it was the way he watched her, the way his eyes followed her like a lost puppy. Maybe it was just a guess. But once she knew, the game began. She started small. When he wheeled himself to the market, she would pretend not to see him and push past him roughly. She laughed loudly when he struggled to reach something on the high shelf. If he tried to speak, she would turn away before he could finish. And the worst part? Others followed. People who once respected the billionaire now saw him as a joke. If the most beautiful girl in the village could humiliate him, then why couldn't they? But he never reacted, never fought back. He just took it, and that made her bolder. One night, she made a bet with her friends. I will make him beg, she said. I will make him cry for me. Her friends giggled, but I felt sick. I should have warned him, told him to stay away. But I didn't. And so, the game turned into something worse. She started visiting his house. Why do you always sit there? She would ask, circling him like a cat. Don't you wish you could run? He would smile softly. I have accepted my fate. She hated that answer. So she started touching him. Soft touches on his face, his hands, his chest. A kind of torture, because she knew he wanted her. And then one night, she leaned close and whispered, if you weren't crippled, maybe I would have loved you. She walked away laughing. I remember that night, well, because that was the first time I saw something in his eyes. Not sadness, not pain, something else, something dark. The next morning, Amina woke up screaming. She said something was crawling under her skin. She scratched and scratched, but there was nothing there. Her father called a herbalist, but no cure worked. Her skin became raw, red, peeling in places, but she kept scratching. Make it stop, she cried. It feels like something is eating me. At night, she heard whispers, a voice calling her name from the darkness. Her beauty faded fast. She lost weight. Her hair began to fall out. Her once smooth skin became rough like old bark. People began to whisper that she had been cursed. She accused the billionaire. What did you do to me? She screamed, storming to his house. He looked at her, his eyes calm. I accepted my fate, he said. Now you must accept yours." She ran from his house, but the nightmare followed. Every night, she saw shadows moving in her room. Hands that weren't there touched her. The voices became louder. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Her beauty was gone, her mind shattered. And then one day, she vanished. Some say she ran into the forest. Others say she jumped into the river, hoping to wash away the curse. No one knows. The billionaire remained. He never spoke of her again. But sometimes when the night is quiet, I swear I hear laughter from his house. Now I saw him. It was early morning, just after the rains. He wheeled himself to the center of the village, as he always did. The air was thick with silence. People still whispered about what had happened, but they feared him now. Some avoided him altogether. But that day, something was different. He stopped, took a deep breath, and then, slowly, he placed his hands on the sides of his wheelchair, and he stood. At first, no one believed their eyes. His legs shook, his arms trembled, but he did not fall. He took a step, then another. A murmur rippled through the village. Some gasped, others clutched their mouths in shock. I felt my heart pound in my chest. The rich, crippled billionaire was walking. His eyes found mine. There was no joy in them, no pride, just quiet knowing, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along, as if everything, the humiliation, the cruelty, the pain, had been leading to this. He left his wheelchair behind and walked away, his steps slow but steady. No one stopped him. No one dared. Some say he had always been able to walk, that it was all an act. Others believe something powerful changed within him after Adana's disappearance. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. The man they mocked was no longer a cripple. And for the first time, the village feared him more than they ever pitied him. Here's the continuation of the story. Thank you for joining our channel, MAT, Billionaire African Folktales. Please, if this is your first time, subscribe and click notification for new videos. Thanks for watching. Diving deeper into Adana's torment and the village's reaction after the billionaire stood up and walked. The torment of Adana. Adana did not die, not yet. After she vanished from the village, whispers grew about what had happened to her. Some claimed they saw her shadow moving along the edges of the forest, thin and fragile, barely human. Others swore they heard her crying at night, but when they went searching, they found nothing. But I knew where she was. I saw her. One evening, when the sky burned red like fire, I went to the river to fetch water. And there she was, crouched by the water's edge, her nails clawing at her own reflection. Her beauty was gone. The once radiant girl was now a ghost of herself. Her skin, once smooth like fresh palm oil, was cracked and peeling. Her hair, once thick and dark, hung in dirty, thin strands around her face. But it was her eyes that haunted me most, wild, desperate, filled with something more than fear. It was as if she had seen something too terrible to name. She was muttering under her breath, whispering things I could not understand. But then she looked up and saw me. "Help me," she croaked, her voice hoarse, her lips dry and cracked. "Please." My feet refused to move. A wind blew through the trees, rustling the leaves, carrying with it a whisper, a laugh that was not hers, a laugh that I knew. Him, the billionaire. I stepped back, shaking my head. She reached out with bony fingers, her nails caked with dried blood from her endless scratching. "I didn't mean it," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I only wanted to play." A shadow passed behind her in the water's reflection. I ran. The village's fear. The morning after the billionaire walked, the village was never the same. People whispered behind closed doors, afraid to speak his name too loudly. Those who had mocked him avoided his gaze. No one could explain how a man who had spent years in a wheelchair could suddenly stand, walk, stride with power. Had he been cursed and then set free? Had he always been able to walk, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth? Or worse, had something else given him the strength? The village elders called a meeting. They sat in a circle, their faces grim, the weight of ancient traditions heavy on their shoulders. "He is not the same man," one of them muttered. "The spirits have touched him," another whispered. "We should drive him out before misfortune falls upon us all," a third suggested. But no one dared approach him. The billionaire walked to the village now, his steps slow, deliberate. He no longer spoke much, but when he did, people listened, really listened. Even those who once laughed at him now lowered their heads in respect or fear. And yet no one ever saw him smile. The day he burned his wheelchair, the village gathered in silence. He dragged it to the center of the village square, poured palm oil over it, and set it ablaze. The fire roared, consuming the last piece of his past. He watched it burn without flinching. Adana did not return to witness it. No one ever saw her again. Some say she wandered too deep into the forest and was claimed by spirits. Others believe she drowned herself in the river, desperate to escape whatever haunted her. But a few of us, those who truly saw what happened, knew the truth. She was still out there, lost, forgotten, tormented, and sometimes late at night, when the wind is still and the village is silent, if you listen closely, you can hear it. The distant sound of girls' laughter, broken and hollow, echoing through the trees. A warning, a reminder that some games are never meant to be played. And then, one day, everything changed. Adana's torment and the village's reaction. The village never spoke of Adana again. It was as if she had never existed. But I knew the truth. I saw her before she disappeared. Adana's torment. After the billionaire stood and walked, it was as if an invisible force had turned against Adana. Whatever had given him strength had taken something from her in return. She became a shadow of herself, thin, sickly, almost unrecognizable. Her once beautiful face now looked hollow, her eyes wide with fear even in broad daylight. She stopped sleeping. "Something follows me," she whispered to anyone who would listen. But no one did. At first, she tried to stay in the village, but people avoided her. The same people who once envied her beauty now feared the thing she had become. Her father tried to get help, but the village herbalist shook his head. "This is not an illness of the body," he muttered. "This is something else." She was cursed. She screamed at night, claiming to see shadows moving in her room, whispering to her, laughing in a voice that was not her own. One night, I saw her running through the village barefoot, her once elegant clothes torn and dirty. She ran as if something was chasing her, though no one else saw anything. She stopped in the center of the village, panting, shaking. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Please make it stop." And then she turned slowly, her face lifting toward the old house at the edge of the village, the billionaire's house. His door was open. He stood there, watching. He did not speak. He did not move. He only smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Adana screamed and ran. She ran out of the village and into the forest. She never came back. The village's reaction. After the billionaire stood and walked, the village changed. People feared him now. It wasn't just that he could walk. It was how he walked. There was something different about him, something powerful. He moved with the confidence of someone who had been waiting for this moment all along. No one dared to ask how or why. No one wanted to know. The elders debated in hushed voices, questioning whether he made a deal with something unnatural. The ones who had bullied him the most suddenly left the village, one by one. They gave no explanations, only packed their things and vanished. The ones who had pitted him now looked at him with quiet respect. The last member died. He turned and walked away, his steps slow, steady, final. From that day forward, no one in the village ever spoke ill of him again. And at night, when the wind blew through the trees, carrying the sound of distant laughter, soft, broken, filled with something dark, no one asked whose voice it was. He was a man who had risen, unshackled from pity and fear. And as the wind carried the last traces of smoke into the night, the village learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. True power is not in wealth, nor in strength, but in the ability to rise, even when the world tries to keep you down. Thanks for watching. Click that notification for new video coming soon. Thank you for joining our channel, MAT, Billionaire African Folktales. Please, if this is your first time, subscribe and click notification for new videos.